What's up guys, Jake Hunter from Fitness Culture. Today we're gonna be talking about how to fix your deadlift, and we're gonna be using Tyson here and actively trying to fix his deadlift. We've been working on a few drills already, but I just noticed a couple guys in our group, meaning our Facebook group for the Fitness Culture app, they all have the same kind of movement faults on the deadlift, and that's what hinders them on getting better. And so I'm constantly correcting these same things. And then I noticed yesterday when we were lifting, Tyson really doesn't have a background in deadlifting. He didn't really do that growing up. And so he has those same kind of faults. And so I figured we'd coach Tyson up a little bit, fix his movement pattern, and we can make a video for you guys showing you how to fix these problems in your deadlift so you don't get stuck and plateau, and really so you're safe moving forward on the deadlift. So let's get into it. All right guys, so the first thing we're gonna go over today is just your setup in the deadlift. I mean, first thing is gonna be foot placement, right? Honestly, I just tell people to go where you're comfortable, because there's some guys that are some of the best deadlifters in the world that are more shoulder width. I personally am a lot stronger with a super narrow setup. I just feel better that way. And then obviously these drills and these techniques still are gonna apply to a sumo deadlift setup, all right? So anyway, let's just get Tyson in here and kind of show you the basic movement fault that most people are doing when they do a deadlift. So Tyson, hop on in here. The main thing a lot of our guys are doing, even when they do have a decent setup, like Tyson, when he was setting up for a deadlift, this is more like a clean setup, right? He's way too low right here. But the thing that Tyson was doing yesterday especially, he's probably gonna be better now because we just fixed him a little bit, but he was letting his butt pop way up, the bar's getting way out in front of him, and then he's just using all back, right? So essentially, it's gonna be one of these things. Let me hop in. Guys will be here. The bar's too far out in front of them, right? The first thing that they do is they try to pull too fast on the bar, butt pops up, now they're in a horrible position. Shoulders are way over the bar, bar's pulling them forward, and now they're trying to fight the bar to get it up, right? So we're gonna go over some things that are gonna fix this problem. And if you have this problem on the deadlift for Tyson, with lighter weight, we fix it in about 3 minutes, all right? So let's get into it. All right guys, we're gonna have Tyson set up in his normal stance like before we helped him out a little bit today. So notice where he's at right now. He's at the bottom, like I said. Notice how far the bar is from his ankle, really. Not even from his shin, just from his ankle right here. It's way too far on his ankle, so it's hanging out almost over his toe right here. It's gonna be a horrible spot for him to get leverage once he starts pulling. Number two, we're gonna be looking at his shin angle. Notice how he has a very negative shin angle here. We wanna get that more positive, and we wanna get that more to vertical. How do we do that? Obviously, we're gonna want his hips to start up a little bit higher, and that's gonna give him a nice negative, or a nice vertical shin angle here. And that way, it'll just this alone can correct your hips popping up in the beginning. And then the last thing that you wanna think about, and this one is not something you're gonna be able to correct overnight, is really the ability to externally rotate, break the bar in half, and squeeze your shoulder blades down to set up your upper back when you set up, all right? So you really wanna be in this position right here when you set up. So I usually even will set up here and squeeze, overemphasize squeezing my shoulder blades into a good position. So if you don't have good mobility, basically in your shoulder girdle at all, that's gonna be hard to do, right? If you're super tight up here, even getting that set up. So working mobility to set your shoulder into place is gonna be a big deal, and working those muscles that retract your scapula and getting them really strong. And really where you're gonna do that is on a lot of your pulling movements, even on just a simple dumbbell row. If you're really focusing on before you pull, getting here, sinking that into a good position before you pull, that's gonna be the same position that you're trying to grind the bar into before you pull on a deadlift. And really that's gonna be the first point where you're gonna break down on the deadlift in your back, right? So if your shoulders aren't tight and start pulling you forward, what happens after that? Boom, 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 boom. It's like links in a chain. All of a sudden your back's just gonna round with your upper back, right? So that's really where that upper back strength's gonna come in. And it'll get stronger as you do it correctly, but as long as you do your upper back work correctly as well, that's gonna help you on the deadlift, all right? So if you need to work on strengthening those muscles that, actually not even strengthening, work on that mobility and the strengthening routines that we usually do, you can click the link above to get those routines as well. But let's keep going on the deadlift right here. So Tyson's gonna set up in his deadlift stance that he was doing, and then we're gonna just correct him and get him into a better stance, all right? So this is where he was at, right? So the first thing that we wanna do, for Tyson, a tall guy like this, I found that taller dudes are gonna be a little bit better, even me too. He's a long leg guy. If he brings his feet in a little bit, it's gonna be easier for him to get in a good position, because then he can bring his hands in a little bit closer. And then from there, we're gonna be looking at where his bar is in relation to his foot. Like we really want the bar to be touching it's gonna be touching his shin, and then really look at his shin angle. So even just raising his hips a little bit. So now look at his angle of his hip right here. Tyson's a tall guy, 6'5", so it might look a little bit different for you, but just look at that angle right here. That's the angle. That's a nice, good angle right here for him to start pulling with. So the bar's touching his shin. He's got this nice angle right here, good back angle, and now squeeze his shoulder blade back into position, and now he's in a good position to deadlift. And then from here, let's just get a rep actually, see how it goes. Good, that looked pretty good. All right guys, the last thing when you're setting up is just something to think about, honestly, when you're pulling, is that if you set up with your hips at the right height, there really shouldn't be any raising of the hips here. It should mostly be raising of the shoulders and then driving your hips forward. Notice how, go ahead and go back down, nice and slow. So obviously his hips are gonna raise a little bit, but really we're starting with hips here. If he thinks about driving his hips forward, we barely even moved, right? So the plane didn't change very much. And that's where I think guys get into trouble the most. They're trying to use their back, they think about using their back too much. Hips come up, but really you should be in position and just think about driving your hips forward. And you're already in you really have good leverage on the bar when you have a good setup like this, right? So you're gonna use that leverage, hips start coming forward, and then just think about getting your shoulders behind the bar. And if you do that, that's how you're really gonna be able to use your body's levers to be advantageous on the bar, and using your body weight to really pull that weight off the ground, right? So it's really gonna fix your setup and fix any of your back rounding. Guys, the last thing, and this is kind of looped into your setup as well, is the way that you're gonna approach the bar and the way you're gonna pull off the ground. So you'll see what I mean when we talk about it here. So a lot of guys, I see, they're trying to pull too explosively off the ground when they have these movement faults. So if you're a vet on the deadlift, you have a heavy deadlift, and you wanna set up, and you know you can just dial it in and go fast off the ground, that's fine. A lot of guys do that. But if you're having these problems, a lot of guys will come up, they're gonna set up, they have a lot of slack in the bar right here, and then they're just pulling, right? First thing that's gonna happen, butt pops up. All right, so the way that we try to get guys to approach it here, and this goes hand in hand with really setting your shoulder blades back, but I also try to take the slack out of the bar as much as possible. So you're gonna set up, get that good shit angle, take the slack out of the bar. So meaning, if I had 700 pounds on right now, I'm gonna be literally, I mean, you'll see the bar come up. I'm gonna set into the bar, set my shoulder blades back, and I'm gonna be like this. So like, obviously I'm putting enough force to get this bar off the ground right now, but that's how I'm gonna be setting up into the bar. So all the slack's out of the bar. I have a ton of tension already, thinking my arms are basically like ropes. There's a ton of tension in my arms before I even initiate the pull, all right? And so that's one thing that's gonna help you clean up instead of just being relaxed and trying to explode the bar off the ground. Get as tight as you possibly can. Get tight and uncomfortable. Even Tyson, we probably took the 3 minutes where when we were fixing his deadlift was just him getting used to being really uncomfortable, getting into position, right? He wasn't used to having that tightness during the setup. It should almost feel like a rep just getting into position before you pull. All right guys, next we're gonna be going into a couple drills that once you've perfected your setup can really help you maintain a good movement pattern once you get going, all right? So the first one's gonna be a reactive neuromuscular training drill. And all that means is basically we're going to be using this band to enhance, basically on this one it's gonna be the poor bar path, so pulling the bar away from his shins. And really what that's gonna do is force Tyson to really engage his lats to pull the bar in closer. So we're gonna cue him to try to really grind that bar up his shins during this rep. And also, when we set up, it's gonna allow him to really pull against the bar without having too much weight on, to really try to get a better vertical shin angle on this one, all right? So Tyson's gonna set up. Let's see what a setup looks like these days. So really remember, vertical shin angle, get that bar. Bar touches your shins, man. Touch, 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 touch. All right, now from here, he's just gonna pull up. Good, don't look down, look straight ahead, there you go. All right. Every time he's gonna reset and just pull. So I give it right now, get that bar close to the shins, there you go. Grind up the shins, there you go. On the way too. Down, 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 down the shins, there you go. Good, perfect, good. So, really, on these you wanna stay super light. The goal here isn't to go heavy and do these at all. We're just using a little bit of feedback so that Tyson can really work on engaging those lats and getting a better shin angle on this one. And this drill is just great for that. You can really feel the band's gonna really overemphasize it, and you're gonna be able to see, like, if the bar is leaving you at all, if it's floating away from your shins at all, you're gonna instantly realize it with this band, where you might not realize it as much. It's just gonna overemphasize it, right? Because if you let it float away at all, it's really gonna float out there. So if you lose engagement at all, the bar is gonna be pulling into your partner, right? So it's just a good drill to use with really light weight. Don't do this heavy at all. This is a very insignificant amount of weight compared to Tyson's max. And so we usually will do this. This is more of a warm-up drill to get guys fired up and ready to go before they deadlift for the day. All right, guys, the next thing that we normally do are gonna really focus on cueing our athletes to pull slow off the ground like we talked about earlier. So just once we get going on the deadlifts for the day, Tyson will set up and we'll make sure you should be on top of them, you know, on top of them, take the slack out of the bar, pull slow to the knee, slow, then extend. There you go, hips forward, there you go, good. So just really focusing on the control, even on the concentric. All right, get that bar to the shins. Let's go, hips just go straight forward, slow, good. So at any time during the day when we're working on a slow pull off the floor, obviously you're gonna call it a bad rep if they try to go explosive off the floor at all. And what this is gonna do is not only it's gonna correct that poor movement pattern, but it's gonna allow them to get some time under tension where they're uncomfortable, right? So most guys that are having this problem are gonna be the most uncomfortable from that floor to knee position. And that could take us into our next drill that we do. All right, so this next drill that I like to do is kind of just part of a progression that I'll put guys through that have this problem, but it's only after we've dialed in their setup already, all right? So assuming that Tyson's setup is dialed in, we're just gonna put him in a little bit of a deficit right here. And for any guy that's letting their hips pop up, this is gonna be very, very challenging, and you can really, really see that movement pattern faults, all right? So Tyson's gonna set up. It's gonna put him into, he already has a tough position right now getting in to a good setup, so this might be kind of difficult for him. But really, like, get that bar close to your body, get your hips up a little bit, there you go. So Tyson's in a really good position right now, and from there, he's just gonna pull normal, drive your hips forward, and then come back up. And so this is gonna make it, the pull off the floor on this, when you're in this position, is super, super hard, all right? And so once he gets back down, once we go through the entire progression and he's back on the floor, it's probably gonna be, after a training block of this, the most comfortable he's ever been pulling off the floor. And if you can get strong in a deficit without letting your back round at all, letting the bar get out in front of you and really dial it in, then you're gonna be super strong off the floor, a lot stronger off the floor, more explosive off the floor, and it's really gonna correct this problem. All right, guys, the last drill that we usually have people do, and this is kind of one that you can do the second day that you lift during the week for the deadlift. So let's say we deadlift on Monday and we wanna do a little bit more pulling again on Thursday. This is a great drill to do. That's not gonna really, we're not gonna work the eccentric at all. It's not gonna tear up a bunch of muscle tissue, and it's just good to drill that first pull, all right? So it's just gonna be a floor to knee deadlift. And all we're gonna be doing here is setting up, just making sure you have a good setup. And usually what I have guys do, get that good setup, you're just gonna pull to the top of the knee and pause for a count. Pause, and then just back down. Good. So pull to the top of the knee, pause, back down, good. And you'll notice on this drill, your shoulders are gonna be moving a lot more than your hips, right? Because your hips shouldn't be moving a ton because of the way you're starting. Remember, they're gonna wanna move forward. So you're just gonna push your hips forward, stop at the knee, and then come back down. So if Tyson really does a good job here, think about pushing your hips forward and your shoulders coming up. Yeah, and it's really just gonna look like that. That's gonna really be what it looks like. So it's kind of weird. It's just really drilling. Your hips aren't moving a lot, and it's almost, if you're doing a good job, your upper body's just moving and your hips are coming forward a little bit, right? So there's not really a bunch of hip movement at all, and it really just dials in that first pull of the deadlift. All right, the last thing we're gonna talk about today is just gonna be kind of a progression that we would put a guy through if they are having this problem, all right? And usually what happens is these problems really show themselves when guys get up to heavier weights, all right? So just for example, a guy in our Facebook group not too long ago had this problem, and the way to fix it, for the way that I like to try to fix it, is to really break it back down, go to lighter weights, and then we're gonna hammer the guys with a little bit of volume, right? So I usually will deadlift a couple times during the week for a short training block. And the first time of the week, we're gonna be doing some slow eccentric training. So we'll show you what that looks like. All we're gonna be doing is really controlling the tempo here, right? So what I'll probably have the athlete do. I mean, let's say we're doing 4 sets of 6 today, and I'll have them pull, get the hips up a little bit. There you go. Get that shin angle more vertical. There you go, right there. All right, pull somewhat slow off the ground, pull, lock it out, and then 4 to 6 count down. So let's go 1, 2, 3, control it, 4, down to the ground. All right, so it's gonna give them a lot of time under tension, but really breaking it down and going nice and slow like this, you can really see all the, if there's any bad movement, it's really gonna highlight that, and it's easier to fix that way, all right? And then the last thing that we'll usually do on that second day of the week is still go really, really light, but really do a high volume day, like sets of 15 to 20. And the reason that I like to do that is when guys get deep into fatigue, those fibers start shutting down, and you really need to focus on keeping your form perfect. And that's where guys usually develop bad habits, are in these high volume training blocks. So if you really pay attention to them on these, let's say that rep of from 12 to 13 gets really, really challenging. And if you can hold your perfect form during those high volume sets, then that's really gonna transfer over to those heavier sets as well, all right? Because you felt what it's like to be perfect under fatigue before. And so that transfers over to lifting heavy weights as well. All right, guys, that wraps it up for today on just a quick tutorial on some things you can do to fix your deadlift and get stronger on the deadlift. We actually did a full deadlift progression that's really based off doing deficit deadlifts. And we're gonna put a link to that in the description below. So if you wanna go through that progression, do some of these drills during that progression and test it out, I promise you, your deadlift's gonna be a lot stronger when you get out of it. So I hope you guys enjoyed this content. Please leave me a comment down below on what you want me to cover next. Thanks for tuning in.